We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
Nosotros crecemos cuando damos.
We grow when we give.
与えるとき成長する。
We grow when we give.
Welcome to R.O.G, Return on Generosity, a podcast celebrating generosity at work. Not financial giving, giving valuable time, alternative perspectives, and genuine collaboration. Welcome to R.O.G. I'm your host, Shannon Cassidy, with my co-host, Susan Jin Davis. And we're both feeling kind of sad that today is our final episode in this iteration, at least. And I really wanted to honor the work and the amazing guests that we've had, including Susan, who was our guest on episode 29, and then again, episode 42, and then she was our guest host in episode 229. So 29 is a lucky number. And we wanted to recap, refresh, give a summary, if we could, of some of the highlights of R.O.G, Return on Generosity podcast, and to really thank and honor all of you listeners for making this possible. So thank you for joining me, Susan. I can't think of anyone else who would be a better companion in this time.
Well, I mean, I have to say that I have a lot of feelings right now. I mean, I feel very emotional about the fact that this tremendously helpful and unique and special podcast is coming to a temporary end. I'm not going to say end. Mm-hmm. I think that what you created here, Shannon, was really important and really made an impact. And secondly, I'm just kind of honored that I'm the one that's sort of doing the farewell podcast with you. I mean, like, enough already with all my, appearances. You'd think to be like not her. She's had enough. Stop talking. But
never. And just for our listeners who don't know anything about our history, we've been through a lot together with your teams that you've enabled me to partner with you on, and just being friends all these years, and just all the changes and transitions in our lives, our children's lives, so you're a close friend who means a lot to me. And you're also someone who really lives this work. So it made a lot of sense to me to bring someone along with me to help me see this from another angle. Because that's another thing that a great friend always does, is helps you to see things differently. So I appreciate your willingness to do this.
Of course. And I really have always loved the title, Return on Generosity. I just think that it's not a concept that you hear often. I don't think we hear generosity a lot in the context of business, first of all. And then the idea of having a return on that, because generosity in and of itself is a very exalted thing. It's a very important thing. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there's also this return that you get from it. You grow from it. You get nurtured from it. So I guess my first question, I love the fact I'm interviewing you, by the way. This is also the third reason I like doing this, is I get to interview the famous Shannon instead of her interviewing us. But I actually don't know the origin story of Return on Generosity. Just give us a sense of, how'd you come up with this? Where did it come from? Because it clearly came from your heart. It clearly came from your experience, your deep experience in the industry and being a coach and helping, groups like mine, operate better. So and then your family comes from your family and how you grew up. So what is the origin story?
Yes. Oh, thank you for that question. And, glory be to God, literally, it is God's idea. And so it just was put on my heart. And like a lot of things that I've done in my life and career, I didn't know what I was doing. And I just got the inspiration to do it. And I think what happened was, I'm a pattern recognizer. Like, I'm somebody who looks at and understands and interprets patterns. And I kept noticing this pattern in my work and in my life, that I felt most fulfilled. I had the most amount of joy. Like one year, my word for the year was joy. And it was that year that this really clicked for me, is that I was happiest and most fulfilled anytime I was giving or fully engaged with another person. And that could even be for like 2 seconds holding a door at Wawa, right? It did, like, the degree of like how much I was contributing, didn't really matter. And it led me to a hypothesis, really, that if generosity is intentionally practiced in leadership, does that change everything? And so R.O.G became my, I don't know, test laboratory to test that out loud with live people and real stories. And I've learned that, yeah, it does change everything.
I'm going to ask the question you ask everybody, which is, how do you define generosity then? We know the genesis of this idea. What is the
Yes.
definition?
And you said it well when you said, like, we just don't talk about generosity and leadership usually in the same vein, because generosity for some reason has gotten commingled with philanthropy. So generally when people hear
Mm,
generosity, they think you're asking them for money. So I specifically wanted to focus on generosity that had nothing to do with money, especially using an R.O.G. People think R.O.I. and like we think about profitability and bottom line benefits and revenue generation and that. So I really wanted to try to separate that out so that we could redefine what does generosity mean. And I think that it means that you give of the things that you really can't get back. Unlike money, like you could make more money, you could find other ways to replenish if you give money, but time, like, I've heard it said, how do you
mm,
spell love? Time. And so as
oh,
leaders, if we're really thinking about giving to others, we all want to have great cultures and we want to have high performance teams and we all want to make a difference and lead people and coach people. We all want to do those things. So we have to invest our time and give of our talent. All of us have something to give. We all have some kind of an expertise. Even just our point of view is valuable,
mm,
right? We don't have to be a master. We have to be willing to share our perspectives and our point of view. So I wanted to test the hypothesis, if leaders in this case, and really anyone, but we're focusing on business leaders, if leaders were to prioritize giving people their attention and time and their talent in ways that were like, you may never personally benefit from it, but you just want to do it because it feels good. And that's the other thing too, is the return on generosity. I think it just at first blush would make you think, oh, you're doing it so that you could get something. But that's the greatest thing about generosity, is that you don't really get like tangibly anything. You get joy, right? You get the
yes.
thing that all of us say that we want, right? If I ask anybody, tell me really, what do you want most in your life? It's like, I want to be happy and I want the people that I love to be happy. Like, I want to feel joy and I want the people that I love to feel joy. So why are we trying so hard doing all this stuff? I feel like we're running ourselves ragged, doing, so that maybe that we could have enough stuff so that maybe we could be happy. And I just think that whole thing has to get flipped on its head, where you have to be like, be happy now, be generous now, be present now, be loving now, give it all now.
Yeah.
And then from that being, do the things that are associated with that, like listen, like give people opportunities, perspective, feedback, forgiveness, whatever, exposure. And then it's fine to want to have stuff, right? I want to have, I don't know, authority or recognition or whatever, fine, but just make sure that it's in the right order. So we talk about be, do, have, and that is something that just repeatedly got proven through this ROG process.
Well, I think that it's also really connected to business results, because I think that if people feel good about
Mm-hmm.
being around each other, that they have these genuine connections, which comes from generosity, right? The leader sets the tone. The
Mm-hmm.
leader says, this is the culture that I want, and I'm going to model it. And people are going to see what generosity means as a leader, from me as a leader. Then I think people will say, I feel valued. I feel seen. I feel like what I say matters, what I do
Mm-hmm.
matters, and therefore I'm going to perform well. I think it's you're just going to get better results because people are going
Right.
to feel invested personally and also invested in each other as a team. And
Mm-hmm.
we've seen that happen, Shannon, haven't we? I mean, I know
We have
with
seen
my
it.
team, you
Yes.
have helped me do that.
Yes, yes. And when like thinking about your team as an example, like those brilliant minds that just aren't the extroverted people who are always just going to like raise their hand and say something. And when you stop and say, "What are you thinking?" or "How does that
Mm,
resonate with you?" or "What would you do?" or "How, what's on your mind?" And then you get this like brilliance coming out. You're like, holy moly, like we could have missed that. Right. And so
We
I
would have
think, like you're
easily missed
saying, like
that.
making that
Yes.
space and asking people and then listening and considering their voice. And then the more you do that, the more people are like, oh, they actually really want to hear what I have to say. Oh, maybe I do
Yes.
have something to
It's
add.
not always positive in this sense. It doesn't always feel good to
Yeah.
get feedback when people feel safe enough to say how they feel about something.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means that feels like it is criticism.
Mm-hmm.
It's constructive, but it's criticism. It doesn't feel good.
Yep.
But when you put aside your ego, because when you don't feel good about feedback, it is kind of like a little bit about your ego.
Totally.
Then you really think about it. Like, you know what? At the end of the day, this is going to make us better. It's going to make
Mm-hmm.
what we do better. It's going to make me better as a leader because I made mistakes and my team called me out on it. You remember, in a good way.
In a
But they
good
felt
way.
safe. They felt safe to do
Yes.
that. And how I reacted, if I didn't act with generosity in
Mm-hmm.
response, I could have shut that down.
Right. And
And
that's why,
so
like,
this
knowing
the sense of
yourself,
generosity.
you're a great example
Yes.
of this, because knowing yourself is you'd prepare for that feedback. How I respond is going to enable or disable them from doing this again ever in the future, right?
Oh,
So you would
true.
like
True.
prepare yourself. How do, like, even like what do I want my face to say? And how do I want to react, and how can I be appreciative of their courage? I think that goes a million miles, right?
It
And it's
really
putting it
does.
into practice. It's all the things that every leader says that they want to do and how they want to be, but it's actually doing it and
It's
knowing
really
that it's not
hard.
easy, right? I think of it as practice. Like it's like being a medical professional. You practice medicine. Like we practice leadership, and you're
Yes.
not going to get it right every time. So how do
No,
we evolve?
and it's also around like you don't want relationships to be just transactional.
Hmm.
Where we don't really care about each other. We're just kind of, making widgets and just going through the process of
Yeah.
doing work and then going home. There's a sense in that scenario that you're really not a whole person. You're just
Hmm.
part of the person you are
Right.
there. And that happens all the time in a lot of environments. But this idea of generosity, I just love that because it is around a commitment to one another. That
Hmm.
is the generosity. So
Yeah.
so you did, gosh, over 250 episodes. Just kind of
Hmm.
when I think about it, like I'm just in awe. I actually was scrolling through just trying to remember the episodes, and I was like, I just don't have enough time. I'm gonna need
No
like
kidding, right?
weeks. But I guess my question for you is, so you did this as a case study. You started it not exactly knowing how that journey was gonna kind of transpire. So now at the end of plus 250 episodes, what are things that really jumped out at you? What are some of the big learnings or the big ahas that came from the 250 plus people that you were engaged with in this generous journey?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Like I think back to so many different episodes, and I've sent them to people. What's great too, and they're archived, so like they're still in existence. That when somebody's going through something, like somebody's struggling with confidence, and I have all of this, like the Tao of self confidence, and the one that Dr. Laura Gallagher, she did one on self acceptance that was really eye opening. Yours on People First, you were just talking about it, People First. Then we had all of the series. I thought the series were some of the things I'm most proud of, because I really
Yes.
wanted to amplify voices that deserved more space, leaders that from across industries, identities, abilities, lived experiences, you name it. And the themes evolved from that intention. And what I started to think about are like, what are the perspectives that are underrepresented or misunderstood? And how can I shine a light there? So we had Black voices, accessible voices, AAPI voices, which you were a part of. We talked about veterans. We had Women's History Month theme, Pride. And so, with these populations of people, Hispanic voices, I just learned so much about them as individuals, their culture, their leadership. I mean, their R.O.G stories were very similar to everybody else's stories. So that's another point in like talk about a pattern, right? Like people are people, and leaders have the same struggles no matter what. But there are populations of people that I really wanted to selfishly learn about. And I figured, look, if I don't know these things, I bet you most of my listeners don't know them either. And I thought those were extraordinary episodes.
So, given that you did spend time on trying to get voices out there that are not often heard, where there's not a lot of awareness, because we live in our own little pods of people that are like us,
Yeah.
and so you really got to make an effort to go out of that comfort zone and broaden your horizons and broaden your perspective. So what were some of the surprises that you got from those different voices, those different people on the concept of generosity, or just in general, like how that all plays out in somebody's lived experience? Like what surprised you?
Yeah. What surprised me was the consistency, and it's similar to what you had said earlier about people want to be seen and heard. That these leaders, these are remarkable leaders who have extraordinary track records and awards and, well accomplished humans who were going back to like childhood stories or moments in their life where they either were told that they don't matter, or somebody thankfully was generous enough to make them clear that they do matter. So it wasn't really a surprise. It was again more like a suspicion that I had that, we've all been hurt. We've all been through hard things. But there are people among us who have not been treated like they matter or that they are worthy or that they should be here. And that's totally not okay. So I loved hearing their stories as much as it was painful to listen to. And I guess I was surprised too about how deeply impacted I was by their stories. Like they changed me.
So when you say that they've changed you, how did you see that happen? Like what happened with that change? Did you do something differently? Did you,
Mm,
like, what was the action that came out of that, if anything? Because
yeah.
you're learning too, right? I mean, we're
Right.
learning because we're taking this on as a content you're providing us. But what did you learn, and then what did you kind of activate yourself?
I mean, it was very validating and inspiring to keep going. I mean, that is probably the reason why R.O.G has lasted over 5 years. It's just, those every guest had something different, even though the concept, like, again, I thought early days, like, look, if I do 5 episodes and we've talked about the same thing 5 times, I'm like, I guess there's not a lot here. But here we are, right? There's over 42,000 downloads. This thing has been in the top 5% over 5 years of podcasts worldwide. Like, there's something there. There's an
Wow.
appetite for this content. People want something positive, for heaven's sakes. They also want hope, inspiration. And every leader so humbly said, like, in their own words, like, anyone can do this, right? This was accessible. So to answer your question, like, how did it change me, or what did I do differently?
Yeah.
Kept it going, for sure. Kept asking the questions, stayed curious about like every person is so unique and different that, I got to hear a little slice of their life in our time together recording episodes. So it made me like incredibly curious about what else is there to learn. How else can I deepen my understanding of humanity and leadership and how to make an impact? It was very energizing.
I imagine so. I mean, I even think that you don't understand your impact on us. So I remember
Yeah.
when I was being interviewed by you, and you asked for my definition of generosity, so I'm cribbing from you.
Yes.
But what I liked about that whole process is that it made me think about my life and what has influenced me, and therefore why I am who I am as a leader in the context of generosity. I wouldn't have come
Mhm.
up with that word, but when I thought about it, it actually triggered something in me that said, you know what? I grew up with generous parents. I didn't think of them as that, but they were so generous in their sacrifice. They were so generous in what they did for the community and our family members, bringing them all here. So it actually created this thought process
Mm.
And once you create that thought process, then you begin to say, how can I deliberately be generous? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, first you're
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, I was the recipient of generosity.
Yeah.
That's why
We
I
all
am who I
were. We all
am.
are.
Right? We
Yeah.
all are. But then it made me think, now how can I begin to be generous as a
Mm-hmm.
leader? And what does that mean for me? So, like,
Yes.
was that one of the goals of the podcast, to
Oh, for
say,
sure.
let's activate generosity
Yeah.
in whatever form you find yourselves in? I mean,
Without a doubt.
how does
Because like
that
I
look for
said,
you?
the hypothesis was like there's something about all of the peak experiences of my life were when I was giving or really connecting with another person. How do you expedite that, or how do you compound that? What's the ripple effect of that? How can you make more people feel that way? Because if people are feeling joyful, then they're also going to be more creative, and they're also going to be more resilient, and they're probably going to have better physical health, mental health, spiritual health, right? They're going to have better emotional health by connecting with people. They're going to find people interesting instead of annoying, right? We're going to look for common ground instead of all the reasons we have to get upset with each other. And so to me, it was like, yes, if we could just unlock even just a 0.00005% more generous thinking, like take a breath, let that person have that parking spot, let that person have the credit for the project that you work on, let the person get the ticket to the event that you really want to go to. Like, just, it's okay, right? There's more to come down the road. Trust in that. And so I think when we can live generously, it's so healthy, and there's a flow. And yes, I was hoping that the listeners would trust me and try it, and then see for yourself.
Because it does reverberate inside your own brain as you're given these words to explain something about yourself and what you can do. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that you put that word in my brain now, because now I can't unsee it. Um, so we live in times right now where people are, to me, not really being encouraged to be generous. There's a lot of a me culture going on now. There's a lot of, how much money can I make? How many material things can I get and buy? Sort of like the worst of capitalism, I think, is on display right now. And that doesn't seem to have a lot of room for generosity,
Mm-hmm.
because that's all about what I need, what I can get for myself, which necessarily means I'm going to take from others. So I think that's just kind of, to me, what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
How does generosity live in today's environment? How can it? And is it really harder or not? I mean, how do you feel about it? Because we're in difficult times now. People
Yeah.
are attacking one another. They are dividing themselves into groups. They're not hearing each other. They're not connecting. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of big. It's not like none are connecting, but how
Mm-hmm.
do you feel about generosity today?
I think we're desperate for it. I really do. I think if sometimes you get that question, if you had a magic wand and you could give everybody one thing. I mean, I usually say curiosity. I wish people would be more curious, and I do think of curiosity as a sibling or a component of generosity. But if we were going to just go to like the X factor, I would want to give people generosity as a mindset, as a starting place, or as a tool. Maybe even we could look at it like that if we don't want to like incorporate it into our spirit. Because if people were more generous, you would see both sides of the story. You would listen to other, say, news programs to get an alternative point of view. You would have a conversation. You would ask questions. You could hear the answer that you totally disagree with and not flip out, because you would be like, thank you. I asked you that question. I am curious. I am interested in learning. Then we would all grow a lot more, and then we would be able to contribute more. So we would all get the good stuff in life, which is, I think, growth, contribution, generosity, all those things, connection, love. I mean, that's like, to me, the bottom line of all of this is love. And the opposite of love is fear. And what I think is leading the ship or driving the ship sometimes, if we're not careful, is fear. We're getting driven by fear. So as a human being I'll say this, in the United States with freedom, we can choose what we listen to, who we talk to, what we put in our brains, what we meditate about, what we pray about. And then I think the Viktor Frankl quote where he talks about how there's stimulus and response, and that in between those things is choice, right? And he said that's where freedom lies. Freedom lies in that choice that we have between stimulus and response. So, the stimulus is the stimulus. Unfortunately, there's a lot of that going on right now, right? I mean, we could just be bombarded. We could be buried. And then it depletes us, and then we feel like, well, we have to stand up for ourselves. We have to protect ourselves because no one else is, because we forget that we're a part of the greater good. So I just think really be cautious about what you allow into your brain and your heart and how that's impacting you, because you choose to, indulge in some of these things, even when you know it's not good for you. So I would say the way to check where you are, like how healthy, your health status on this would just be like, how do you feel? If you feel anxious, upset, unappreciated, worried, taken advantage of, a victim, like you're probably consuming things and believing things that aren't serving you. So I would just ask for you to take a break from that diet for a while and, get some alone time. Go for a walk, check out nature. Like just go be in awe in nature. Like you don't really have to go much further than outside your front door. Talk to someone. Tell somebody what you're thinking about, what some of your challenges are. And then a really good tool to use is gratitude. I think for people to get grounded in gratitude, you and I both practice that, and it is a game changer. So for people to take some stock in what is working, what isn't broken, what isn't in conflict, who do I love and who loves me? And those would be ways out of, I would say, the vortex of the stress that
Yeah.
exists.
Yeah, take yourself out of it. And actually, this reminds me of this issue of abundance mindset. I mean, generosity is having that abundance mindset instead of the
Yeah.
scarcity mindset.
Yep.
And scarcity, it really does have at its core fear. That you
Mhm.
have to be protective and you have to hold on tight to only what you have and the people that are in your world. It's a
Mhm.
very narrow construct, but it's based on a defensive posture. Whereas
Absolutely.
generosity, the way you're talking about it right now, is no, I'm abundant. I'm grateful for the fact that I have more now,
Yes.
and then I'm open to that abundance. And I love that you talked about Viktor Frankl. I mean, talk about somebody who lived in gratitude despite having the most
Horrendous. Yeah.
horrendous experience in Holocaust experience and concentration camp experience where he lost everything. But it also reminds me of the writer and scholar Bell Hooks, which you were
Mm.
talking about when you mentioned love.
Yes.
Love isn't just a feeling. Love is an action.
Yes.
We choose to love. We must choose to love.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that we must decide to do.
Yeah.
And when you make it into an action, it allows you to actually move forward with a mindset and philosophy and actions that are around love and generosity, really.
Yeah. That's it.
That's, I think, what you're saying that people ought to be doing
Yeah.
is move forward deliberately with love and generosity.
Absolutely. And just try it, right? For those that are
Yeah.
listening that are like, no, you don't understand. And that's true. We don't understand. We don't know their story. We don't know their circumstance. So we don't fully understand. But what we do know is living this way, choosing to live this way as often as possible. I don't think that we unfortunately, I don't think we get a permanent residence in like the generosity version of life, right? I think we get to go there when we're mindful and we choose to do that. And then I think it's a game of elasticity where we recognize, when am I feeling all those feelings that I don't want to experience, and I'm looking at things through a lens of, I'm jaded or I'm skeptical or cynical, right? When I'm looking at life that way, I have to own the fact that I'm choosing to look at life that way, and I could zap myself back to this state of generosity and gratitude. And why I think gratitude is a little more accessible than generosity is because I think it's like a gateway thing where you have to get yourself into that state of awareness about what is already great, even if it's hard. Like, I don't think gratitude means rose-colored glasses and everything's happy. I think gratitude is taking stock in what is and the blessings in your life and the fortune that you have. And then from that place, that's why I think it is a grounding, like grounded in gratitude. And then sometimes with that, we have that abundance that you're talking about. And then the abundance flows out of us into generosity. So I think
Yes.
if we're feeling like I got nothing left to give, that is a really good signal for you to respond to and say, okay, you know what? When I'm in that place and the person who needs my generosity is me, like I need to take care of
Yes.
myself.
I was
I
about
need
to say
to
that.
fill in my own, I have to to invest in and do some self-care and give myself a break, say no to the invitation or decline the willingness to pitch in on this thing that you know that you could help, but you're really, especially now, it's the end of the year, people are exhausted. I think we've got to look at generosity holistically. So this isn't just about giving to everybody else. We also need to be generous to ourselves.
I love that because that's not something that we hear as well in the work context as leaders, because you're being asked as a leader to do so much for others, for your
Mm-hmm.
team, for the company, right? For your family, if you're the leader of your family.
Yeah.
But this whole concept of generosity being also about being forgiving of yourself, caring for yourself, being dedicated to your own wellness
Mm-hmm.
is another element of generosity. I love that. I
Yes.
hadn't see. I'm learning and growing
Yeah.
as we do this.
Because that's the thing is that we think
Right?
immediately we think generosity is giving to other people, and that is part of it for sure. But if we don't have anything left to give, now we resent the fact that somebody still wants feedback or they, need our time and attention or talent or whatever. And then you're like, well, I don't want to feel like that because I generally like being able to do those things. So I just think it's, you know, being true to yourself, understanding that you are the only person who really knows what fills you back up. And you're the only person who's really responsible for making sure that that happens. So it's not because everybody else needs everything. We like to tell ourselves that story, but really it's a personal responsibility that all of us have to prioritize ourselves, love ourselves, and, so that we can go do the great things that we want to do. To both.
I
Yes.
yeah, I
And
remember. I remember I had a boss a long time ago when I was early in my career, and she would always say, "Take vacations, okay? I want you to use your vacation,
yeah.
and when you're on vacation, I don't want to see an email. I don't want to hear from you at all for that whole vacation." And I was like, "What? Like, but there's
Right.
stuff going on. I need to keep it on top of the things."
Yeah.
And she said, "Because you're going to be refreshed, and you're going to be a better worker. You're going to have a better attitude if you get the rest and relaxation that you need." And I just thought that was like so unusual. By the way, she's the only one in my whole career that ever said that to me. And I was like 30.
Yeah,
So
I love
and I'm
it.
not
It's
30 now.
permission, right?
It
It's like,
is, but
yes, and then
that's the self-care part that I
it
think is
is.
really interesting. She connected it to work.
I love
Um,
that.
so okay, so 250 plus episodes. We're going back to that number again because I actually can't believe it. Because 5 years. I mean, you do the math. How many
Yeah,
episodes you did was who
totally.
does that? That's like a full time job. And by the way, that's not your full time job. But so top 3 leadership lessons that you learned through R.O.G. Like what? It doesn't
Mm.
have to be 3, but pick a number. The top ones. Because you certainly learned, we learned. So, what did you learn? What were the top things for leadership that you learned from this amazing podcast?
Ah, well, I did learn that generosity is the X factor. I mean, that's
Mm,
unanimous. That
yep.
every time we would hit end recording, I would think to myself, wow. And here we go, another perspective on the same topic. So I feel complete with this chapter, and grateful for all that it's taught me. I also learned that self-compassion is a part of generous leadership, that we're never going to get it right every time, but we can continue to try. And so that resilience. And then I also learned about the power of, and again, it was a hypothesis that got proven over and over again, the power of feedback and mentoring. Those were thematic in the R.O.G ethos, that taking time to thoughtfully give feedback, not just constructive feedback. Because I think, again, back to associations and linking, we often link feedback to constructive, hard criticism type feedback. And like Kim Scott was a guest twice. She did one on radical candor and one on radical respect. Both are great episodes for our listeners to replay again. I just listened to Radical Candor one again the other day in preparation for giving someone feedback, because I was like, oh, I think I got the model, but I want to, so that thoughtfulness in how we're giving feedback, both praise and to help someone to get better. And the methodology is that you first ask for feedback. So for us to ask for feedback, and then again, how do we respond to it when people are generous enough to give us feedback, not just like, oh no, you're doing a great job, but when they give you something. And then for us to have something in the care personally and challenge directly quadrant, which is radical candor, all of those episodes. And then Amy Edmondson, we had Amy Edmondson, like the famous psychological safety, Amy Edmondson. She was on R.O.G and she taught me about, because she wrote the book called Right Kind of Wrong. And that's what she was talking about on the podcast. But the whole thing is about how to fail well. So again, we're going to fail. So how can we use some of the tools from people like her who studied this like a science and said, here, in fact, that's the subtitle of her book, The Science of Failing Well. How can we use that thought leadership to help us through the inevitable failures that we're going to experience?
We will all fail.
I learned a ton.
We're going to all fail. And that's where there is learning, even though, ouch, sometimes those really hurt. So I've got two questions that are kind of different sides of the same coin, perhaps. But the first is, what is a story or stories that have really stuck with you from your guests?
Okay. Von Leidemon. Her name is Von. She is Vietnamese, and her mom is a Vietnamese refugee. And when she came to this country, she was living in a shelter. And this famous actress, whose name I'm going to forget, well, I have forgotten, but people know her. She was a volunteer at this shelter. And she, the actress, had these bright red nails, beautiful nails. So Vun's mom was like, how are your nails so beautiful? And the woman told her about getting a manicure. And Vun's mom, rather, and her other people at the shelter were just enamored with this woman's beauty. And long story short is the woman ended up reaching out to a salon and said, would you be willing to teach these women how to do nails? And that really is the origin story of why so many manicurists are Vietnamese, because this ended up taking off and it became this thing, and it has grown and grown and grown and grown and grown. And it's really because of the generosity of this woman who was volunteering at this shelter, who wanted to help out these young ladies who ended up becoming entrepreneurs, and really the rest is history. So people like stories like that. I mean, I've had so many guests with stories like that are like, what?
Right.
And then, and Vun in her own right is a generous leader, and she talks about creativity and she uses Lego serious play. So yeah, that's one.
Yeah, because generosity can be found in the strangest places, right? I mean, here is a family that was literally displaced, that was running from violence and war. They have the sad side of the story, but then there's this sense of also starting anew and opening up yourselves to a new life and a new world and a new way of thinking. So there can be those positive moments of generosity that arise even in the worst of times. I just think
Right.
that just really kind of struck me. It's like they basically were refugees and that's why they were there, but at the
Mhm.
same time that hatched an idea that
Yes.
was a game changer. Okay, so the other side of the coin would be, I'm sure you've talked to lots of people who've listened to your podcasts.
Mm.
So what's something that have what's something that's stuck with you from your listeners that they've
Mm.
said to you about ROG?
Ah, what a great question. I think the number one thing, and I've gotten a lot of beautiful responses and comments on like, oh, that was a lesson I really needed, or this was so timely, or I forwarded this to my team. This is something that I'm really bad at and I'm going to continue to work on. Like those things really meant the world to me. But I think the number one thing is when people talk to me about feeling seen. Like I felt like I was represented. I felt like I was seen. I felt like this gave me access to something, or that I matter, that it was company, like really that sometimes ROG accompanied people on their commutes or while they're mowing the lawn or whatever they're doing,
Yeah.
that they got to learn something. Some people told me that it has refreshed their hope in humanity. I mean,
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
big.
come on, right?
That's huge.
Yes. Right. Like, oh, there are good people out there. And I'm like, yes, everywhere. We're just unfortunately hearing a lot of the stories about the people who aren't doing these things. But man, wouldn't it be great if generosity and generous leadership became mainstream? I think
Yeah.
it would change a lot of the problems we have, including the mental health crisis that we're in right now. It absolutely would help the loneliness
Yes.
crisis that we are literally in the middle of right now. Like people are more connected than ever, but they're more lonely than ever. Like explain that to
Yeah.
me.
Well,
So
how
I
they're
think
connected. They're
keeping people company and educated and inspired is that side of the coin.
That's terrific. So did you achieve what you wanted to achieve with this?
Yes, I did. And that's why closing it, or at least pausing it, because you and I both don't want to, say that it's the end, but it's just a pause. But I did. Achieved a lot more than I thought I would. And like I said,
Okay.
it was a request that I believe that I got from God to do it. And I always said, like, the minute this becomes about me and not about you, we've got to wrap. And also, when I think that the hypothesis has been proven, which it has, that generosity is the X factor. And so I feel complete with this chapter and to honor the work. And it's time to take the lessons into a new evolution. And rather than keep repeating the same cycle or process, I want to find new ways to learn about this topic and to share thought leadership and inspire people to live like this.
What do you feel like you didn't get done? I mean, is there something that you're like, I wish I would have, or if I come back to this, I would now want to do dot dot dot. I mean,
Yeah.
how would you complete that
Well,
sentence?
it's interesting because this, just to giving you a little behind the scenes, this was never monetized. We've never had advertisers. We never sold ad space. I just didn't want to have that kind of podcast. And that would be a smart way to do it. That's why most people do it that way.
Yeah,
I
sure.
just didn't want to. I kept thinking like, who would be my advertiser? So I did do advertising in the first 2 years of ROG, but it was
Oh,
free. And there were 30-second spots for like the T. Howard Foundation and Fred Moss's travel company, so Moss Travel. So just organizations that I wanted to highlight, because I did read that people, like listeners, needed a break in the middle of an episode. They were all 30 minutes. Anyway, it was very like
right.
exact. So as much as I think, oh, I should monetize it, I don't know that I would do it that way. I think it would just have to be the right partner. And I just didn't really, I honestly didn't look too hard to find a partner. So that's totally on me. Another thing I would do though is to have Al Roker. You and I
Yeah,
both
of
wanted to have
course.
Al Roker on. So there were certain guests where I just like, I adore certain people for their generosity. and I know they would be amazing guests, and someday they will be. And they'll just continue to lead by example in whatever it is that they're doing professionally. There's a lot of them. I have a big long list of people who maybe I'll just be more strategic on how to get those people on the podcast in the future. But those would be some of the things I would do differently.
And like, is there a particular area of leadership that I mean, I guess it's hard to tell. You got 250 plus episodes to kind of understand, you roll up from. Is there a particular area of leadership or area that you feel like you need to do a little more on? Or is it a little too soon for you to really kind of
Yeah, no,
look,
I don't think, I
really
mean,
take that
that is something
perspective?
like I just would track my guests to see, how are we representing humanity in different forms, and both, in all the demographic types of ways, but also like industry wide. Like we had a lot of big business, but I had some entrepreneurs and philanthropists and authors, artists, people who just created their own thing, or people who worked for large organizations and had their discovery there. So I'd really tried to find educators. I mean, we had all kinds of professionals represented, and I love that because it again was a through line to, like, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter how senior you are, it doesn't matter what your title is, or how much experience you have. What matters is that you recognize the value of prioritizing people, and you find your way, your authentic way to do that. And that's the other thing that we used to always do, is recap, like, the what did the listener say, and how might the listener apply what they learned to their own work and lives, because I really want our listeners to do it their way. They're getting inspiration, they're getting some ideas and tips and techniques from these guests, but I'm asking them to think about what does your version of that look like, and how can you commit to that?
So I got a couple more for you. The
Got it.
first is, because we need to know more about Shannon, since Shannon's always shining the light on others. How are you activating generosity in your life right now?
I think I'm really at a stage right this second of being more generous to myself, and putting a end cap on ROG for right now is actually giving back to myself, because it really does take a ton of time to research and prepare and record and edit and market and everything. And so, as much as it has been so fulfilling and such a great act of service, and a huge opportunity for me to connect with other people, and selfishly, I learned so much and got so much. So it really was the ROG in its most beautiful form. So I think me being generous to myself and investing my time and energy in my own well-being and whatever's next for me, with rewriting the 5 degree principle and refreshing my keynote, and
Right.
just really connecting with teams, that feels indulgent, really, in some ways, because of the time back that I'm going to get. So that is one of the ways that I'm experiencing generosity. And then I think through my friends, I've been doing a lot of investing in my friendships this past month, and even this whole year. And my word of the year this year, 2025, is one.
One.
And that has a lot of meanings. One of them is that we are all one, and that I want to connect with each person, like, individually. So the one to one, and that I am one. Like, my heart, my head, my everything is one. Like, I'm not a puzzle that has all these pieces. I'm one thing. And I have one life. I have one opportunity. I've got one shot at this. And I want to take responsibility for that and try to make the biggest impact that I can. And so that is something that I'm going to do in this time, is just think about what is it. And something I've talked about doing for years and just haven't, is to create a generosity strategy, because a lot of people, I think, feel the same way that I feel, which is that you see so much opportunity, all the things that need to, you don't know all the things, but you see a lot of the need out there, and then you're overwhelmed by how much, and then you think, oh gosh, like, what really could I do? So I want to invest time on, how do I help people kind of go through a process to synthesize, what do I really care about? What are like my values and my mission? And then how does that translate into how I'm being generous?
I love that we're finally able to hear from you on how you are deploying this generosity in your own life. Really super helpful. So I think probably one of my last questions is, what do you want your listeners to do now? Because Return on Generosity has ended. We've got a lot of content we can still go through, but what do you want us to do now that you have given us this path for 5 years around what generosity looks like in a variety of different contexts from a lot of people, different people? What do you want us to do?
Thank you for that question. I want all of us to take responsibility for how we're investing our time. And because if we're talking about love is spelled Time, and really return to love, I think a return to love is like get away from fear and return to love. And these are some of the ways that you can do it. You can do it through being grateful. You can do that by finding where you want to contribute and how you want to contribute and be intentional about that. Maybe even take stock in the ways that you're already contributing, because for most of us, we think about what else we can do instead of really analyzing what we already are doing, and then do that with even more intentionality and love in our hearts. And I want us to be in that place of choice, right? Because the stimulus and response, again, like in that space is our choice. And we get to choose how we're going to live our life, how we're going to make a contribution, how we're going to use and deploy and share our strengths and gifts, how are we going to connect with people, how are we going to love more deeply. And for those who are harboring resentment or anger or hurt and things from the past, I also want you to revisit that and just ask yourself, what's it costing you to hold on to that? And could you let it go? And what I say at the end of every episode is to stay generous, everyone. And I say that because you already are generous. So choosing to stay generous, like even in the most microscopic way, to feel the joy. I want everybody to feel the joy that comes from giving, because like we always say, we grow when we give.
We really do. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, Shannon, for being so generous yourself in creating this very special platform for us to talk about something that we maybe didn't have the word for. The concept of generosity wasn't something that we thought of in giving of ourselves and giving to ourselves. So thank you for literally embodying generosity, for which there is a great return for all of us. And for over 5 years, or, hundreds and hundreds of podcasts later, this is going to live on, and this will stick in people's brains, and this will be something that we can continue to perpetuate on our teams and our families and our communities, because you allowed us to do that, and you encouraged us to do that, and you showed us what is possible by being generous. So I think I can say for everybody that we're really grateful for you and for this amazing journey that hasn't ended, but is taking a pause for now. So thanks, Shannon, for all these years.
I really appreciate that, Susan. It has been an honor to hold space for these conversations, and I so deeply appreciate you. Thank you for being here with me all the way through.
All the way through.
Forevermore. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to R.O.G. Return on Generosity podcast. Please help us grow by subscribing and reviewing us on your favorite podcast player. And for more information, visit bridgebetween.com. We grow when we give.
우리는 나누면서 성숙합니다.
We grow when we give.
On rayonne quand on donne.
We grow when we give.